welcome to Sheba Sunday, episode 41. This might be my I'm thinking of I've been moved to change the name, but we'll deal with that when it comes. In the meantime, welcome episode 41. I called this what does I call it? Is your husband in love with you? Does your husband is your husband in love with you? This came to my attention because YouTube brought a video across my screen, my algorithm, and I knew the guy who was like in it. And so let me do a little, let's see, what does Sheba Small look like? Okay, that's kind of, can I move it? Oh, okay. I didn't mean to pause him on that picture, but the clip that he posted was called "The Success of Relationships is Based on More Than Your Feelings." Not let's see what he has to say. I'm gonna use the clip. It's a 7.5 minute clip. I'm going to go to another the clip that I saw from Life with Melanie. It now has, how many views does this have? I don't know how many views. Oh my god, 20,000 views and 483 comments in 3 days. So let's see. Let me know if you can hear this, okay?
Are you in love with your wife?
Okay, I can't hear that at all. So let me see. Billy, hello. Is this working? Let me see. Desktop audio. I don't know if you can see it. I don't know if you can hear it. Let's see. Oh, I hear the tinkling of door beads. It's heard? They can hear it?
Yeah, it was working, but
okay.
Make it so you can hear it.
Oh, perfect.
Can you hear it now?
I don't know.
Give it a shot.
Let's see. Okay.
I had a feeling. No, I'm not in love. Me either. What? We can't get off this subject. I gotta ask you a question. Are you in love with your wife?
No.
Me either. What?
I don't believe in that shit anyway. It's okay. It's overrated.
No,
listen.
Then why?
Listen.
Okay.
See?
Y'all need to explain that shit to me then.
I had a feeling. No, I'm not in love with my wife.
Why?
I don't even know her.
What are y'all
7 years.
doing? Why?
So actually I saw the original clip when I when the guy in the sunglasses who asked the question, who answered the question, asked, are you in love with your wife? He was like, no, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that shit. So I actually heard his original thing when he posted it maybe like a week before, and I remember being like, no, that's wrong. That's bad. I actually didn't even fully look at it, but it's tough because this guy goes on to say, he doesn't know his wife, and he uses this example of this older black couple who'd been married for 20 years, and the woman's like, I don't know him. You don't know maybe you guys are using a bad example to judge the quality of your marriage. Close the folder on screen, please. Okay. I'm probably good. Anyway, so yeah, tells a story about because you don't know her, so that's why he's not in love with her. Then he says,
Put up this story or this ideal,
Fantasy.
the fantasy, without, as opposed to just really dealing with what's there and accepting it
Well,
to
you know
the
what?
best of your ability.
Oh, okay. So it's because being in love is a feeling, a fantasy that is like unrealistic. So don't aim for it. Don't shoot for the stars cuz you probably won't land on the moon. Better just stay here on earth. Ooh, girl.
I understand this.
Oh, great.
Now,
Other guy in
how do you get
sunglasses
women to
understand.
understand that?
See, that's the other thing. Like, oh, other guy in sunglasses understands that. How do we get women to understand that? Bro, please worry about yourselves. Please stop trying to get women to understand your crazy freaking logic. Anyway, what he says though is
Right?
But-
Get them to bow out of the fantasy.
You get them by you bowing out.
And my wife thinks she's in love with me, probably.
It's a buzzword. It's a concept that's been propagated that we've adopted and creates an unrealistic expectation that we look for, and when it's not present, we feel something is wrong.
Yeah, we've allowed that to condition ourselves to that concept being a governance.
okay. So let me pull up my main screen. Yeah. So tough take. Yeah, and so actually though, but like I know that guy. Me and Billy were interviewed on that podcast he has, and Billy has been interviewed. He mostly interviews guys, but he's interviewed women too. And yeah, I was like, oh no. And so when I saw that on my YouTube that someone had stitched it and was, perceived him as this, one of these podcast bros trying to, kiki with other men about how little they love their wife and how to get one over on women, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to tell Billy. And Billy called the guy. I was like, have you seen this? Anyway, the guy was very like taken aback by the feedback that he was getting. Here, let me see. I think he was just like kind of baffled. He didn't think people would take it that way. But he also, wanted my perspective because, I love women and I am very on women's side. And so I think he wanted to know what I, felt about it, if I, understood some of the commentary. So he told me, he said, of course I'm in love with my wife. Of course I love my wife, but I'm not in love with my wife. He thinks of those as two different things. Love is like, the love you have like for, because he said like, you never hear like a parent or your sibling, say like you're in love with them, you love them. And so he said that in love is like a feeling, a fantasy, a fairy tale, an unrealistic expectation. Okay. And so, I explained to him, I Googled actually, I was like, what does it mean? What does I love you, but I'm not in love with you mean? And it came back, it's differentiating between platonic and romantic and or sexual love. So you will not hear a parent or child say, I'm in love with you. I love you, but I'm not in love with you because, they platonically love you. They care for you as a human, but they're not romantically interested in you. I've heard that phrase when I have let someone down or someone is trying to break up with someone or, reject their advances. You go, I love you. I love you as a person, but I'm not in love with you. So let me free you to go find the person who is in love with you because it's not me. And so I explained to him, I think most people understand if you give us a 7-minute, clip of a 4-hour conversation and you don't explain that you love your wife, you just repeatedly say you're in love with your wife, you're not in love with your wife. You laugh about it. Like, I mean, people are logically getting the message that you're not in love with your wife. You love her as a person, but you're not in love with her. So like they think you mean you like love her, like you think she's, you know, a good person and you care about her, but not romantically interested. Okay, so he clarified that is not what he meant. And he's like, why didn't people like ask? Or I have all of these other, you know, conversations where I talk about, no one is going through, you know, 8 hours of other conversations to cobble together the message that you love your wife when you put out an edited thing where you explain, of course you're not in love with your wife. Ha ha ha, you don't believe in that shit. Like, well, okay, everyone is taking you at your word. And so some of the comments were like, oh, he's gay, he should be divorced. I mean, yeah, you were kikiing with your boys about how you're not in love with your wife. And like, that's a fantasy. Like, what? Being in love? Like, so, you know, he clarified he is romantically and sexually attracted to his wife. Of course, he, you know, he loves his wife. But, you know, he explained that, you know, he was talking to his therapist and he was like, you know, he didn't feel in love. But he knew he loved her, so he was still like, I'm gonna marry her. You know, I understand she's good for me. I blah blah blah. She's a good reflection for the healing I need to do, and blah blah blah, all that stuff. And so he still like logically chose his wife, even if he wasn't in love with his wife. And he said, like, you know, the success of a marriage isn't dependent on being in love. And yeah, of course, that's true. You know, marriage was originally a contract between two men. It was an exchange of property. You know, you pay the bride price to a woman's father, and you get a slave, essentially, who now cleans and cooks for you, creates your children, rears your children. And, you know, the exchange is complete. So love is not necessary for that. But this is 2025, babe. Like, women can do battle by themselves. They can create, you know, their own reality. They can care for themselves. They don't need to have a husband to get bank accounts. So like, yeah, like you should want some love, you know, like she should expect love. And I think people are saying it's a step backwards to expect women to be in relationships with men who love them as a person, as a, you know, parent loves their child, but, you know, isn't in love with them. Oof. Like, you know, okay, what did Billy say? That's what I'm saying. At the root, the issue is like, it was just a clip edited with context removed. This definition that they were contrasting against was defined earlier and not in the clip. But so one, I think it is a 4-hour conversation that he intentionally chose to include this part. If he wanted to clarify it, he could have. He could have put in that clip parts of the conversation where he said, I love my wife. But instead, he repeatedly put in parts where he said, I am not in love with my wife. Of course not. So, you know, of course people get the message that you're not in love with her. So another thing, so yeah, he was talking to his therapist and he was like, I don't feel this feeling. So, cause he didn't feel what he thought in love was supposed to feel like, he was like, okay, I'm not in love. However, like, and he felt anxious that he like wasn't having this feeling. And so he then bypassed this feeling in love as a requirement for marriage and just defaulted to his logic and utility, you know? So he's like, oh, okay, I'm not feeling the feeling of in love that I told myself I'm supposed to, you know, whatever he had in his head about what it looks like, what it felt like, it wasn't there. So he's like, okay, I'm not supposed to, you know, use it. I overrode my feelings in favor of logic. And I just, like, that's not, you know, the right thing. men, I think, are taught to be really afraid of their emotions and to fear them and to fight them and suppress them and to not be overcome by them. And so you think of feelings of love, feeling in love, as a superfluous, it's a nice thing, but it's not a requirement, when actually it is. You and he and his wife are not starting an Arby's franchise together. They're starting a marriage. So, like, if you were going into business together, creating a business arrangement, it's okay if you just fulfill the four corners of the contract, and love is not included in that. But with a marriage, it makes sense. I'm not having some man living in my house who I'm not in love with and who is not in love with me, who's pretty sure, especially if my husband was pretty sure I was in love with him, but like he was sure he was not in love with me. Okay, don't let me hold you. Get out. Go find the woman that you're in love with. So men are not used to the language, like the of like sitting with your emotions and really getting to know what that feels like. And like all of us, have to learn it better, but I think women are better at it. Like men are really unfamiliar with the language of emotions. All of us are. Like, we have to learn it. I was thinking about how a lot of children, or people who are in abusive relationships, who find themselves being abused, don't realize it for a while because you don't have the language. So for myself, I thought being in an abusive relationship looked and felt a certain way. I thought it would look and feel more like how I felt as a child, like someone was physically hitting me, and I, was just feeling it was like an adult to a child, but I hadn't had the experience of like a peer-to-peer abuse. I saw myself as this like strong, powerful like woman who like don't take no shit, and so it wasn't until several people were like, hey, look at this wheel of power and control and see if any of this resonates with you. And I was like, oh snap. I started reading and like starting to identify certain behaviors and things that I was experiencing. And I was like, oh no, wait, am I in an abusive relationship? Am I in this thing that I didn't even realize it until I had the language. And so what I posited to this guy, I was like, because he was explaining, all the things the romantic and, love things he does for his wife, how they communicate, all these things. And I was like, well, consider that maybe you are in love. It just, you thought it was going to look a certain way, but it actually looks like this, you say, being in love is this fantasy. And then he was talking about he told me about how, like if you asked him 10 years ago if he would be in this relationship with this person who is so free and all these things, he wouldn't have believed it. So it was more than a fantasy. The relationship he has now, 10 years ago, is more than a fantasy. He couldn't even imagine it. But he's attained it still. Even though it was something he couldn't imagine, even though it was a fantasy, even though it was unrealistic because he hadn't seen it before, he was still able to achieve it. And so I'm like, maybe sit with what it feels like, what it would feel like, what it would look like to be in love with your wife. What does it feel like when someone is in love with you? What are those actions? What are those things? And maybe consider that you're in love with your wife. Okay, Billy says, but this is a wild climate with the podcast bros, and they got shades on, oof, and laughing like that. It matches all the assumptions for the viewer. Yeah, I mean, it paints a very clear, perfect picture of that. So anyway, I was like, consider that maybe you are in love with your wife, but when you're in this group of guys and you're drinking and you want to be one of the guys, and the guys are like, do you feel this feeling? And you're like, feelings? No, no, I use logic. And it's like, bro, like, what if you are in love? What if you guys are all in love with your wife and you don't realize it? Though also, what if you aren't in love? Like, what if you're, like, not that? Like, what if the absence of that feeling is not so, like, I used to be a really anxious person, have a lot of anxiety. Like, I wake up in the morning, just feel really anxious. Then I started to realize, like, sometimes you're anxious to go on a trip. Now, when I say that, I could mean I have anxiety, like there's, flights and taking off work and all these things. I'm anxious to go on a trip. But I could also say I'm excited to go on a trip. It's the same word, actually. I'm anxious to do this thing. I could be using it negatively. It's causing me anxiety, or I'm excited to do this thing. And so when this guy said, he was talking with his therapist and he was like, I don't feel this feeling. I feel anxiety that I don't feel that feeling. What if you're excited? You're anxious and like it's excitement, but you are misreading it as anxiety and a bad thing and not love, and thus you just like totally discounted it. Anyway, I think your feelings are there to keep you safe, and so it's not smart to override them and disregard them and do what you think is best. Like, sometimes if you aren't feeling in love, you might not be in love. And you might have told yourself though that, like, love is feeling in love is an unattainable thing, so just settle for this not feeling in love. But no, I think you should hold out. Okay, so a thing I did when I first started talking with Billy on Tinder, I told him that people have a tendency to fall in love with me very quickly. They like learn about me, they spend a little bit of time with me, and they're like, oh my gosh, I am in love with this woman. And after that, they kind of like don't care so much what I want. They're like trying to convince me to date them or be with them. And so I told Billy, I like warned him. I was like, listen, people fall in love with me very easily. So if you start to feel that feeling, don't panic. Totally natural. Just go with it. So I, managed his expectations. So like he, of course, started feeling love very soon. And so rather than being like, oh, no, I have this uncomfortable feeling that I'm not used to feeling. What is it? Ugh, like love? No, that's bad. That's wrong. And so like he didn't run away from it because I just like managed his expectations. I was like, listen, you're probably going to fall in love with me. So just, that's what that is. That's what that uncomfortable feeling is. And so, maybe this guy, this is the first time he's ever been in love. So he's never been able to accurately identify it. So also when I posited, I was like, maybe you are in love with your wife. He was kind of like, I just see it as like two different things, and love versus being in love. And it made me think about like, he's got this attachment to an identity that isn't in love, rather than seeing the ways that he's already in love. And like, yeah, like, okay, do you guys like, there's this episode of The Twilight Zone called The Big Tall Wish. It's from like the 50s or 60s or whatever. It's black and white. It's maybe in the first or second season of The Twilight Zone. It is the first episode that has black people in it, and it follows this boxer, Foley or something, and he is about to go to this big fight, and like as he's on his way out to go to the fight, he runs into this little kid who lives in his building, this little black boy, Henry or something, who like looks up to him. Like the guy always like, takes him out to baseball games and stuff. And the kid is like, Foley, I'm going to make a big tall wish that you win the fight today. And the mom's like, oh, he's always talking about a big tall wish, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, Foley is doing the fight. and he's losing. And it switches to like he's down for the count or whatever, and you see the boy watching the fight on TV, and he's like crying. He's like, "Come on, Foley, you can do it. I'm making a big tall wish for you." And suddenly it switches, and Foley, he's fighting a white guy. The white guy is on the ground, and they're lifting his hand up, and he's the winner. And he's like, "Wait, what? I thought I lost. I must have blacked out or something." And his trainer was like, "Nope, you were winning the whole time. I don't know what you mean." So he like goes home. As he's walking home, all the black people in the neighborhood are like, "Yeah, good job. You're the hero of our neighborhood. We love you. Good job. You did it." And he goes and sees the kid, and he's like, "Hey, like, I thought I was losing. But then I won." And the kid like looked ashamed, and he was like, I made a wish. I wished for it, Foley. I made a big tall wish." And the guy is like, "Oh, come on." He like shakes the kid by the shoulders. He's like, "Come on, kid. You're too old to be believing in wishes." And the kid like goes and like cries and blah blah blah. And anyway, then next scene, Foley is back on the ground, and he is like counting out, and he loses the fight. And so he goes back home, and everyone's like, "Ugh, bro, why didn't you try this?" Or like, you could have won, but you anyway, so he loses. He goes and sees the kid, and the kid's like in bed, and he's like, "I'm sorry, Foley, you're right. I was too old to be believing in wishes." And the guy's like, "Hey, maybe wishes and magic is real. You just have to believe in it." And that's the end of the thing. Now, I think that little black boy, grew up and learned the lesson that it is childish and silly and illogical to believe in magic and wishes. And like, that dude Foley, he was so attached to this reality where there's no magic, there's no wishes. He's a loser. That's his reality. He believed in that reality so much, he shook a child, admonished the child for believing in wishes, and made it so the reality he wanted to existed. The reality in which he lost, fair and square. Like, bro. Anyway, I see a lot of black people kind of like, limiting your imagination, making sure you want to be realistic, making sure the women don't start believing in fantasies, make sure you don't start aiming for an unattainable fantasy. And I'm like, bro, you don't think white men want you to believe that? You don't think white men want you to be realistic about what you can expect? You don't think white men want you to be limiting women's ideas of what love is, marriage is, what their like reality is? Yeah, so anyway, rejecting this version of you who wins because you're too attached to a version of you who loses. Rejecting a version of you who has it all because you are attached to a version of you who never gets it all. You got to be realistic. Okay, so yeah, they want you to believe that you can't create the reality you want, that wishing is a silly, childish thing that's not going to do any good, that being in love, is an unattainable fantasy rather than an actionable goal. When I think unwavering imagination is really all you need. I learned, so this is now for like the women, because a lot of the comments were, like, ladies, when they tell you who they are, believe them. Absolutely. Yes. I learned early on that love was whatever my parents wanted to give me. My father wanted to be gruff and yell at me, but, allowed me to live in his house, and, bought me clothes and things that I need to live. And it didn't matter that he made me feel unsafe or hurt or not enough. Like I was supposed to, my mom was like, he loves you very much. I'm like, okay, well, I can't tell because he treats me very mean and I feel really bad around him. But I think a lot of people, a lot of women, a lot of Black women are taught to just whatever a man wants to give you, you have to kind of do the work to understand that he loves you, and that's good enough. He might not be in love with you, but that's okay. You have to, absolutely not. Okay, so Billy says, I think apart from the edit, there's a definition thing. They're trying to distance themselves from something. I don't think that thing is being in love, but that was the word they chose. The logical attachment angle is interesting. Thank you, baby. Yeah, I mean, like they're very confident and attached to a story that they're not in love. They don't even believe in love. Like, oof, okay. That's really profoundly sad. I feel very sad for you. And I'm mad that they're trying to convince women that being in love doesn't exist. Silly woman. Like, oh my God. So I learned early on, and a lot of women have learned early on, to be realistic, right? You're not a princess. No one's gonna treat you, lovingly. Like, they're gonna support you. They signed a marriage contract, so they will dutifully do it. But as one of these guys says in this thing, someone asked, like, is your wife your soulmate? Nope, my wife isn't my soulmate. Like, ugh, oh my God. Okay, like, why would you marry her then? Why would you marry someone who's not your soulmate? Maybe you told yourself it's going to take too long, or you're never going to find your soulmate, so might as well settle for this not soulmate. Yeah, so I have since learned and accepted, and I'm going to step more into this. Like, I deserve someone who loves me, who is in love with me, who likes me, who can fuck. Like, I want all of the things. And I'm a queen. I deserve it. And so it is. I deserve it all. So I'm not going to settle for someone who isn't passionately in love with me. Not just like in love with me or thinks they're in love with me, is certain, is sure. And certainty is a choice. You can just choose to be certain, There's this song that I remember when I was growing up hearing. It goes, you've got to move to mountains, drain a river dry, swim the deepest ocean, pull a star from the sky. And if you do all this to prove your love is true, maybe then I'll fall in love with you. And I always thought that was like amazing. My dad would always chuckle at this idea of like, move 2 mountains, drain a river dry, swim the deepest ocean, pull a star from the sky, and maybe I will fall in love with you. After all of these things that show your devotion to me, then maybe I'll see. And I think these days, a lot of men want women to have no standards. They want you to be a pick-me. They want you to just accept whatever they have to give. And you got to know that that's enough. It's, they're not going to, come on, climb a mountain for you. No. And I'm like, girls, no, baby. No. I think on some level, those guys maybe don't believe that they deserve a love like that. That they deserve a woman who is, worth going out of their way for, worth being in love. I don't know. Maybe he believes he doesn't deserve. He said, his relationships are a mirror. So when he looks into the mirror of his relationship, he's like, I'm not in love with that. Pretty sure she's not in love with me either. Like, ooh, like, okay. If you don't think you deserve that, you are going to, if you think it's unattainable, you're going to choose that. You're going to create it. I know way too many women who settle for a perfunctory, less than love, a realistic love, a love that, adheres to the four corners of a marriage contract, but, they're not in love. Come on, it's a fairy tale, not a fantasy. And like, that's just not enough. So I hope I hope the wives, raise their standards. We are no longer accepting breadcrumbs. We do not settle. I remember Judge Judy was talking about how when she, as her show, she made millions and millions. And the negotiating process would be that she comes to the table with the producers, the showrunners, whatever, and she writes what number she wants. She puts it on the table. And, the guy was like, oh, well, this is, and she's like, no. This is not a negotiation. This is my price. If you don't want to pay it, I walk. And that's how we got to be, ladies. You know the value. You know your value. Do not let these men set the value for you. Do not let them clip your wings. Don't let them be like, come on, be realistic. How do we get these women to understand? Don't believe in a fantasy. Like, no, that is not their job. Your job, ladies, is to know your worth, know your value. If Billy was on a podcast, if he was on that podcast, kikiing with the boys about, no, he's not in love with me. I mean, it would just never happen. So I'm not even gonna like really fantasize about it. But I would know, like, oh, okay, he's not for me, because my person is madly in love with me. My standard is like Gomez Addams, from the Addams family. Like, I want someone who is obsessed with me. They worship me. They recognize I'm a queen. And they will move 2 mountains, drain a river dry, swim the deepest ocean, pull a star from the sky. And after they've done all that, they will still wait on hand and knee in the hopes that I will fall in love with them. Do you guys remember, did you guys watch The Princess Bride? That's another example. Their love story starts out, Wesley is just a farm boy, but like day after day, he just comes to her and she gives him stuff to do, and he's like, as you wish, as you wish, as you wish. And when, he gets kidnapped or something and he goes away, and she is, kind of trapped by this like evil king who's forcing her to marry him. She's beautiful. And so he just, he's like, I just want this beautiful woman, but like, I'm gonna, it's just, politics to like consolidate my kingdom, and then I'm gonna, kill her or whatever. And so Wesley, he swims across an ocean, climbs up a mountain, fights this great swordsman, defeats a giant, outsmarts this wily Sicilian, all so he can make it back to his love, the princess, who he's like, I'm here for you. I'm here to save you from the clutches of these men who are not in love with you. And at first, because he's wearing a mask, she doesn't recognize him. And so she's like, get the fuck away from me. My true love, Wesley, is going to come for me. And not knowing that it's him. And she like pushes him down a hill. And he's like, as you wish. And she finally realizes that it's him. It's Wesley. He has come for her. She recognized him by his words of devotion. So it's interesting. When I was with this guy with the glasses, who does podcasts, his name is James. He's a very nice man, as far as men go. I think though, I'm a very bright light. I trigger the unhealed parts of people. And so, men got a lot of unhealed parts. So I feel like I trigger this guy a lot. And it kind of, he struggles to hear me sometimes. Because I think I remind him of his mother somehow in some weird way. And so he called me, and I told him, what I thought about the podcast and all the feedback. And he was like, I feel like you want me to comply. Like you want compliance from me. Bro, like, you called me. You the one getting your ass dragged across the internet. Like, and now you like, oh, yeah, I want you to comply. Bro, do whatever you want. I just hope you listen to the mirrors. But as I thought about it, I was like, you know what? I do want compliance. I do want the people in my life, certainly the men, to say, as you wish, my queen. As you wish. Thank you. Thank you for your sage advice. You're right. I never saw it that way. So yeah, I hope he listens to the mirrors, all of the women who are like being like, oh gosh, what? Why would you say this? Please don't tell these men that it's a good thing that they're not in love with their wives. We like already feel like men are not in love with us, that they're just using us and that they're like tricking us to the altar so that we're now trapped in a marriage contract or with a child with this person who wasn't in love with us, wasn't willing to do all this stuff to be with me. Okay, so Billy says, and that's the toughest thing because James has been about men stepping into their best self, right, raising their standards and their efforts. That's like what his podcast is about. Yep. But the clip went viral. Yep. And, like, listen to the collective. Like, we're telling you what we received from what you were putting down. Billy says he's madly in love. Yes. As I wish. One thing in our life, in me and Billy's relationship, we do, like, Billy is the floor and I am the ceiling. Billy determines how, like, low we go. And I decide how high we go. Billy is the chairman of the board, while I am the mistress of the ceiling. So, ladies, when you hear a bunch of men kikiing about how do we get the women to stop dreaming so big, let's get them to be more realistic, run. Get out of there. And if he's for you, he will do whatever he needs to show his devotion to you. Raise your standards, ladies. The men who are for you will happily rise to not only meet them, but exceed them. Yeah, I want ladies, we really have to dare to create our own fairy tales and know that the men who are for us, the Gomez Adams, the Wesley of Princess Bride, the Billies of Billy and Sheba, happily, ecstatically, they will pledge their devotion to you. They will show it to you. When some guy asks them, are you in love with your wife? Billy will say, absolutely. Are you kidding? Oh my God, let me count the fucking ways. And that's what you should want, ladies. Don't settle for someone who's just gonna, keep you realistic. We need you to dream bigger. Dream bigger. Dare to create your own fairy tale. All right. I'm getting out of here pretty soon. Love you. Bring your head up to the screen. It's all made up. I love you. You're amazing. And okay, great. I got 10 more seconds. I want to do 44. I think I got everything out. Love you. Keep them standing.